thank you. Because this is a season for giving thanks, isn't it? And I'm so thankful to be here in Louisville, Kentucky, because this is my last gig of the year. This evening, I'm headed home to Los Angeles. Brad and I are really looking forward to it, particularly this year, because we haven't been home for more than 10 days. I mean, and that scattered, you know, 2 days then and 3 days here and so forth, because this has been the most insane year that I've ever lived through. It began in January in Vancouver, British Columbia. Now, I'm a Southern Californian. Vancouver is past the northern border of the United States in Canada. And it's January. And we're filming outdoors in the cold. And some of the scenes were on the water with that cold north wind blowing right over the waters. I began filming the Terror Infamy in Vancouver. You saw it? How many of you saw Terror Infamy? Yeah, not too many of you. You know, ratings don't count anymore nowadays because of all the different ways that you can see a TV show. Back in the day, there were only 3 networks, and the network that you tuned into at that time that the show was being aired was a network that everybody that wanted to see that show tuned in. Now you can tape, you can videotape, you can wait until next week or next month to see it. They have streaming, and so they don't count ratings anymore. So thank you all you dedicated people, few people, who did see it when it was first aired. We filmed for 5 months there in Canada. I died in January, February, and March. We Southern Californians are fragile hothouse flowers. You don't take them out of our sunroom, out into that cold there. And until April, then Vancouver explodes in cherry blossoms. They say cherry blossoms are great in Japan. No, no, no. It's in Vancouver, Canada. They have cherry blossoms all over the city. And as if on cue, suddenly overnight they explode in pink and white. It was magnificent. And we filmed until February. And so 5 months of filming in Canada. And then we had a few days back home, but then the first episode of The Terror was going to start airing in June. So we had to go on the road again to promote that, visiting all the newspapers and TV stations all over the country. I didn't come to Louisville then because we were saving it for the last, the best for the last. And then in July, my personal pride in the achievement, my graphic memoir, They Called Us Enemy, was published. Thank you very much. Yes, and I know many of you already have copies of that, and I'll go into it, but you're going to get a better copy here at this convention because they're hardcover, something that you can save and keep. And I know so many sci-fi fans, and particularly Star Trek fans, keep and savor and make museum pieces out of Star Trek memorabilia. I've been signing a convention magazine that goes back to the 1970s. Some of you weren't even born. I know those of you who were already born and watching Star Trek back in 1966. I know who you are. I just look at the top of the heads. The color gives you away. Or the shine gives you away. And bless your hearts, we thank you because you are the original fans who found us and have been so dedicated all through the decades. decades. It's hard to believe Star Trek is 53 years old, and you guys are the ones that originally gave us support. So thank you very much. But the reason, yes. Thank you. You know, you really deserve that applause, because without you, it wouldn't have happened. This phenomenon of being 53 years old with so many children. I call our spin-off shows our children. And we have been very bountiful. Our sixth child is pregnant right now. And he will give birth. We know the gender of the child. He will give birth in January under the title Star Trek Picard. Second series. But you fans, the original fans, are like Star Trek. I mean, the reason why fandom has grown and grown over the years is that the original fans replicate themselves like tribbles. I mean, you're replicating all over the place, squeaking and bouncing, and then the first generation is giving birth to more and more, and the seventh generation is about to be born. And so we love you for your dedication, but we love you for your fecundity. You know what fecundity means? Those of you who laugh know what that means. You propagate yourself a lot, and the fandom keeps growing and growing. And so the calendar became filled with now two things that I had to promote. The Terror Infamy, and they called us Enemy. And so visiting cities all over the country, and Canada as well as Great Britain. We had to cross the Atlantic twice to go to London and promote both the book and the series. And I spoke at Cambridge to boot on the internment of Japanese Americans. And that's the other thing I have on my calendar, speeches at various universities all over. I may have visited some of your towns, those of you that are here from out of town. And I've never spoken at a college here. You have colleges here, right? In Louisville. Invite me. And I'll talk about that. But, so we've been on the road for the last 2 months without ever having gone home. In fact, on this 2-month tour, we went to London twice. So I am so glad to be here. And I am so glad that I can look back and look with pride with what I've done. And especially, they called us Enemy, because I just got the news a couple of weeks ago. My childhood imprisonment here in the United States. Simply, we were innocent. We had nothing to do with Pearl Harbor, but we looked exactly like the people that bombed Pearl Harbor. And so we were imprisoned. And we got to tell that story in a form that will reach a lot of people and a lot of young people. I chose the medium of graphic novels, or graphic memoir, actually, because I grew up on comic books. I love comic books. And at that early age, when you're a preteen or a teen, you're absorbing in all the information you get. And I wanted to use that medium to reach the young readers of today, because they're going to become the voters of tomorrow. And they're going to become the movers and shakers. Some may run for public office. And I want them to know fully the important chapters of American history. And I consider the story I tell in They Called Us Enemy as a vitally important part of American history. But I tell that story from the vantage point of a 5-year-old kid, which is what I was when the soldiers came to our home, carrying rifles with bayonets, shiny bayonets on them, and literally at gunpoint we were ordered out of our home by American soldiers. We were Americans of Japanese ancestry, but we had nothing to do with Pearl Harbor. My mother was born in Sacramento, California. My father was a San Franciscan. They met and married in Los Angeles, and that's where I was born, and my brother and my sister were born, the three of us. And yet, because of the fact that we looked like the people that bombed Pearl Harbor, we were put in a barbed wire prison camp in the swamps of Arkansas. I remember the barbed wire fences, the Sentry Tower, machine guns pointed at us, and when I made the night runs to the latrine from our barrack, searchlights followed me. It was a concentration camp. But to 5-year-old me, I thought it was nice that they lit the way for me to pee. I was a 5-year-old kid. It was dark in the swamps of Arkansas, and the light really helped. But for my parents, that same light was an invasive, degrading, humiliating light. So two different stories. One from the eyes of a 5-year-old kid, and those of my parents. My mother was in her 20s and my father was in his 30s. Two different stories, and that's the story I wanted to tell. And I wanted to tell it to especially the young people, although it's an important story for all ages, because we today are hearing the same kind of irrational, stupid, hateful rhetoric coming from politicians. I'm sure a good number of you have been watching the impeachment hearings on TV. Woo! You're for it. A lot of people are for it. But we need the information. But half of that committee, and you know which half it is, they're acting as if they're not Americans. Because they're telling, consciously, they're telling blatant lies. And we know that they're lying. And they know that we know that they're lying. And they're doing it. I mean, two of them, I'll name them. Devin Nunes, he's from California. And at one point this year, I announced that I was going to run against it. Because we don't need it. But people don't remember when I announced that. I announced that in April, on the first day of April. You get it. I just wanted to intimidate him a little as well as get a laugh out of people. But the thing is, many people took it seriously, and they started sending me checks. I had to send them back with April Fool written on them. But I think there are people who are elected representatives of the United States Congress that are unbelievable. When I was a child, my parents heard the words that we're Japs and we are traitors and we are spies and we are organizing a fifth column activities without any evidence. And that same kind of mentality I hear from that half of the so-called intelligence committee. It is shocking that these people are representing us who know and lie knowingly. And they know that we know that they're lying. How can these people get elected? What is it about us voters that get people like that there? And that's why I want to reach young people, so that they will make better decisions in the future and help build a better America. And I want to share that with all of you here. So we brought about 100 hardcover versions of the book. And we are also going to publish that in the Spanish language, because we want to reach an even larger readership. because it's so relevant to our times today. And so with that, so I hope that you'll all come by and pick up a collectible copy, hard copy of They Called Us Enemy. And so now for the fun part, to hear your thoughts, your opinions, your criticisms, whatever. We'll have a good, lively discussion. They have, that's a mic there. And on this side too? No, you have to come over here if you want to engage in the conversation. So let's begin that with you right here, and I'm going to get a sip of water.
Yep, we all know that Star Trek was wrong.
I'll keep it on my lap. No, I don't want it to look too sexual.
Yes, Star Trek was robbed the last 2 seasons. Obviously a 5-year mission. Had the show continued for season 4 and a season 5, or perhaps even longer, what would you have liked to have seen Sulu do or say that that hadn't been seen in the first 3 seasons?
That's what I call an iffy question. If Star Trek had a fourth season and a 5th season, and believe me, we wanted it to have that. But I believe in the reality, and I believe that reality has been a stroke of good luck. It was an amazing bit of good luck that we were canceled after the 3rd season, because then it went into syndication. And because we were 3 seasons of a low-rated show, the rental fee was low. And so the syndicators, when they bought Star Trek for reruns, they decided, oh, this show doesn't cost us that much. Let's air it 5 nights a week, Monday through Friday. And that's when the fans found us, and the ratings soared. But it was too late. We scattered to the 4 winds. The cast, the crew, the writers, everybody. And but the ratings continued to go up, up, up. And Paramount tried to revive Star Trek as a TV series again in 1974. But as we got closer to February 1974, they got cold feet. I mean, the ratings were high, but it's reruns. And will they tune in again for a brand new series of Star Trek? And so they started dragging their feet, and they started dragging their feet even more. They said 1976, but in 1977, 20th Century Fox released Star Wars, and it exploded at the box office. And the ugly-headed greed rose at Paramount. 20th is making all that money. We could make some of that. We have a sci-fi project in our backyard, and so they decided to make Star Trek as a feature film. And sure enough, you were all there with your tribble daughters and sons, producing grand tribbles, and the box office soared. And that's what made Star Trek an amazing phenomenon, where we're now into the 53rd year, about to celebrate the 54th year in September of next year. It's an amazing thing, and that's the reality of what happened. So I don't engage in the iffy, because then what happens in reality could turn bad or turn good. And in our case, it was a bounty. So don't think always in terms of if, or I coulda, or I woulda, I shoulda. Believe in the reality, deal with the reality, and move on.
Hello, my name's Dan. I'm from Louisville, and I am a fan of the original series, even though I'm dressed up by the end of the year. Thank you for coming, sir. it's been addressed already, but seriously, is there any interest seriously in running for public office, either nationally or in California? I think you've got our vote in here. The climate is right.
Yeah, but where do you live? If I ran in California, you'd have to move, and California is a rather expensive place, and re-register. So I don't, well, I'll confess to you, I have a checkered past. I have run for public office. Back in 1973, I was the chairman of the the Asian American Committee chair of the Tom Bradley for Mayor of Los Angeles campaign. And Mayor Bradley won. The first and only African American to be the mayor of Los Angeles, and also the most successful mayor of Los Angeles. He was re-elected 4 times, served 5 terms, served for 20 years. No one else has ever done that. And he is still the most beloved mayor of Los Angeles. And when he was my city councilman, and he left a vacancy there of his seat. And my political friends urged me, because I'm an actor, I have name ID, and that's a leg up I have, so why don't I run? So I decided, well, that's intriguing. I do love public service, and I will give it a try. And I went to Tom and asked him for his endorsement. As the mayor of Los Angeles, that would be a powerful endorsement. But he said, George, I wish you'd told me before I announced for the mayor's office, because another attorney came to me and asked for my endorsement, and he was a wealthy person, and he was going to be able to financially help the campaign. And so I gave him my endorsement. So but he said, I would love you to win. Sorry, I can't do it publicly because of the commitment I made. And I ran, and I almost beat that lawyer. Until 9:30 election night, I was leading, and I was excited. But then a few other precincts came in, and as they say, by a slim sliver of a margin, he won. And I decided, well, good, because I still have my acting career, and I have political credibility. So it turned out well. I'm not going to dwell in the ifs. I could have, would have, should have. But I will stay engaged, and I will be active, because that's a responsibility of citizenship. And if I'm asked to serve on a public commission or a board, which I did, Tom Bradley asked me to serve on the Southern California Rapid Transit District Board with the mandate to get started on the only. And so those of you who want to see what a real subway system should look like and run like, come to Los Angeles. We have the newest American subway system with the enhancement of the arts, reflecting the nature of the community up above, and the ridership is continuing to go up. The art in some stations are a little tacky, but they're popular. For example, the Hollywood station. I had a better idea, but the only one that was within budget was to make the pillars look like palm trees. So the Hollywood station has a lot of fake leaves on the pillars going up to remind people of the palm tree, the real palm trees up above. My idea for that station was, Hollywood is always full of tourists, a lot of tourists. And Hollywood is famous for what else? Movies. That's where Hollywood movies began, because it's Hollywood. And here we take the people. It's not like going to an art gallery and standing and looking at a painting. The viewer is in motion, moving. They're in a subway car. And I know many of you as children, you had these books that had pictures of runners running in the various stages of running. And when you flipped through them, it looked like the runner was really running. And we could use that idea, get some imaginative artists to use that idea and have a row of Hollywood movie actors doing a scene. And the lights come on as the train whizzes by, and tourists will love to ride that from the Hollywood and Vine station to the Hollywood and La Brea station. That would probably be the highest ridership station. So there's that practical aspect, but also the exciting thing of using a different form of art where the viewer is in motion. Transit in motion, and but that was too expensive, and we couldn't do that. So now we have fake palm trees holding up the station, or holding up Hollywood. So anyway, I'm like a politician, I guess. I get long-winded and I ramble. To your question of why didn't I run for public office, the answer is I have. I have a checkered past.
Hi, my name is Josh. I read in an interview that you had mentioned to Gene back during the original series to maybe introduce the idea of a gay character, but the climate at that time, I mean, obviously it was the 60s, so probably a tough sell. So I was wondering your thoughts on Discovery, and I was also wondering if they approached you to help develop the characters of Dr. Colbert and Stamets.
Yes, there's an interesting story behind that. Well, going even further back, I was closeted most of my adult life. I was gay through my adult life, but I also wanted to be an actor, and you could not be hired as an actor if it was known that you were gay. When I was a teenager, I had my favorite movie star, my heartthrob, a guy named Tab Hunter. Some of you might remember him. Good-looking, blonde, young, and dynamic. Every movie coming out of Warner Brothers Studios starred Tab Hunter. Damn Yankees, Battle Cry. I'm sure you can shout out names of Tab Hunter movies. But one of the scandal sheets exposed him as being gay. And suddenly, he disappeared. He wasn't around anymore. And that was an object lesson for me. You cannot be gay and expect to have an acting career. Here was Tab Hunter, a major movie star, making tons of money for Warner Brothers Studios. But he was dropped like a hot potato when it was revealed that he's gay. And so I was closeted all my life. But I've been an activist all my life on other issues, social justice issues, political candidates, and so forth. And so during one of our hiatuses, Gene Roddenberry threw a party at his, he was living up in the Hollywood Hills then. And everybody was at the far end toward the house of the party, and they were somewhere in their swimming trunks and bathing suits and kind of swimming around at that end. And the others were standing around or sitting around drinking and nibbling. And I noticed Gene swam out to the far end, and he was kind of dog paddling at the far side. And so I thought maybe this would be an opportunity for me to talk to him privately. And so I swam out, and I said to him, we've been dealing with a lot of controversial issues, and that's what's making Star Trek unique, and that's what's attracting the audience. We've been dealing with the civil rights issue, the Vietnam War, war and peace, but there's one issue that we're not dealing with, and if we're really going to be venturesome, what do you think, Gene, about dealing with the idea of equality for LGBT people. And Gene said, I'm with you. I think we should. I would love to. But I'm walking a tightrope. Television in the 60s was a very restricted medium. We could not deal with issues that deal with present day politics or other controversial issues. Gene was dealing with it metaphorically, but he said the lowest rated show we've ever had was the episode in which Kurt kissed Uhura, an interracial kiss. That was the lowest rated because in many parts of the South, I don't know about Kentucky, but in Florida, in Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana, and in the Carolinas, Star Trek, that episode of Star Trek was blacked out. It wasn't shown. So the ratings plummeted. He said, I can't afford to have another controversy because we'll be canceled. So I created all the characters as straight characters, including your character, Sulu. And I understood that. I was closeted, so I understood that. I spoke as a liberal activist. Gene may have had some antenna connections, but he didn't expose me. But we talked as if, you know, we were both straight people. He said all the characters I created had to be straight because I needed to be on television to comment on the issues that I've been commenting on. I understood that. But in 2014, I think it was, John Cho, who's now playing Sulu, called and said, the writers are thinking of paying tribute to you for the activism, my activism for LGBT equality. Because at that time I had been out for about 10 years and was active. And they want to pay tribute to you and make Sulu gay. What do you think about that? And I told John this story about my discussing the issue with Gene Roddenberry. And I said that all the characters are created straight. And if the new movies, Star Trek Beyond, is going to change, I think it's wonderful that we're dealing with a gay issue, but if they're going to make Sulu gay, that's indicating that Sulu was closeted all up to that time. And I don't know whether I want to have that kind of tribute paid to me. Besides, I said, this movie is going to be coming out in 2016, which is the 50th anniversary of Star Trek. And the appropriate thing to be doing is to pay tribute to Gene Roddenberry, because it was his creation that gave us this amazing show, this imaginative, visionary, and engaging show. And so the tribute should be paid to Gene. And instead of making the character of Sulu gay and coming out, closeted gay and coming out, why not create an original, new gay character who has his own journey as a gay man with Starfleet in the 23rd century? And John said, all right, I'll relay that to the writers. And a couple of weeks after that, the director called, and I had that same conversation, and he listened very carefully, and he kept saying, you're right, I agree. And so I thought I communicated it. But when the film came out, what was it all about? I mean, it was such a scene. Sulu comes back from a mission. There's a guy waiting with a child, and Sulu comes up to them, and the child is cute, so he goes with a child and hugs her and kisses her. And in the next shot, they're walking out off together. That guy could have been a friend or a brother. I mean, there was nothing to suggest that he was gay. but that the intention was that he was supposed to have been the partner, and the child was theirs. So, full of sound and fury, signifying nothing, as Shakespeare said. I mean, what was all the huff and puff about? I am so glad that Star Trek Discovery is dealing with the gay issue as it should have been dealt with originally. And Gene would have been proud to have that. But Star Trek Beyond's attempt was a meh.
Thank you so much.
All right, unfortunately, this right here will be the last question.
Yeah, my wife and I recently watched Infamy, and I wanted to ask you, given your history with trying to educate people on the internment camps, was that a role that you pursued yourself, or did they approach you? And also, did you get a lot of input as a consultant to bring some historical accuracy to the series from the internment camps?
Thank you for asking that question. I knew nothing about the show, but this guy called me, Alex Wu, and he said, I'm a neighbor of yours. He said he lives in Hancock Park, and we have a project on the internment of Japanese Americans, and you are an authority on it. And I said, well, I lived through it as a child. He says, yes, we know that. And because we're dealing with that subject, would you consider being a consultant? And I said, that sounds interesting. I'd like to know more about it. And then he said, well, I'll walk over and tell you. And so I said, come on over. And so he came and we sat in our living room, and he told me about the project. It sounded intriguing in conversation. I said, I'd like to see a script or two. And the first one was profoundly moving. And the second one was, I loved the way they created the cliffhangers. And so I said, yes, I'd be happy to come on board as a consultant on this story. And then he said, incidentally, you're an actor, aren't you? Since you're going to be on the set, can we write a role for you? And I said, I would love that. And so that's how I got involved with it, both as an actor and as a consultant. But I must say that the depth of their integrity in replicating the internment camp was amazing. I had forgotten so much about it, because it was I was a child then. When they rebuilt the barracks there in Vancouver, British Columbia, they built it on little tiny stilts, because Arkansas, well, it wasn't supposed to be the Arkansas camp that we were in, but because it floods there in Arkansas, it was on, so high, and there was a crawl space underneath the barrack structure, and we had adopted a stray dog that we called Blackie, jet black, with 2 dots, brown dots over its eyes, sort of like the peanut butter dabs. And whenever Blackie was scolded or there were something scary happening, jeeps roaring about, he'd scurry into the crawl space. And that kind of little details that brought back memories for me that I had not consulted with them on. It was very well researched and very well replicated, and I enjoyed the acting part of it. When we were playing the suffering in the cold part in January, February, and March, that was not acting. They caught the reality of it. But we're proud of that show, and we're hoping that more people will be able to see it. What'd you think?
I loved it.
Good.
Thank you.
And thank you all very much. I guess my time is up, but from the bottom of my heart, thank you all for your devotion to Star Trek, and the vision of Gene Roddenberry and your personal support for the projects that we have going on. Thank you, thank you, thank you, and may you have a wonderfully grateful Thanksgiving.